A young man notices her and eagerly approaches, saying, "Can I get you a drink?" Annoyed, she snaps, "A drink? Oh, how original. Like, I've never heard that one before. Not even a clever pickup line? You think you can just walk up and bother me like that? Why on earth would I let someone like you get me a drink?" The young man pauses, then calmly replies, "Well, because I'm your waiter." After 25 years of marriage, a husband looked at his wife and said, "25 years ago, we lived in a modest apartment, drove a simple car, and I slept on a sofa bed. But every night I was lucky to share my life with a stunning 26-year-old blonde. Now, we have a beautiful house, drive a luxury car, and sleep in a big, comfortable bed. But here I am with a 51-year-old woman. It feels like you're not holding up your end of the deal." Without missing a beat, she replied, "Well, feel free to go find yourself a 26-year-old blonde. And when you do, I'll make sure you're back in a modest apartment, driving a simple car, and sleeping on a sofa bed once again." He reduces height and spots a man down below. He lowers the balloon further and shouts, "Excuse me, can you tell me where I am?" The man below says, "Yes, you're in a hot air balloon, hovering 30 feet above this field." "You must be an IT," says the balloonist. "I am," replies the man. "How did you know?" "Well," says the balloonist, "everything you have told me is technically correct, but it's no use to anyone." The man below says, "You must be a manager." "I am," replies the balloonist. "But how did you know?" "Well," says the man, "you don't know where you are, or where you're going, but you expect me to be able to help. You're in the same position you were before we met, but now it's my fault." I remember one time when I was home visiting my folks. My mom asked me to set the table for dinner. I opened the refrigerator, and taped to the inside of the door was a risque picture of a lovely, slender, perfectly built young woman. "Mom, what is this?" I asked. "Oh, I put that up there to remind me not to overeat," she answered. "Is it working?" I asked. "Yes and no," she explained. "I've lost 15 pounds, but your dad has gained 20. He glances around the room before settling into a seat beside a strikingly beautiful woman. Giving her a brief look, he casually checks his watch. Noticing this, the woman raises an eyebrow and asks, "Expecting someone?" He smirks. "No, just testing out my new state-of-the-art watch, courtesy of Q." Intrigued, she leans in slightly. "Oh, and what makes it so special?" "It uses alpha waves to communicate with me telepathically," he explains. She chuckles. "Really? And what's it telling you now?" He grins. "It says you're not wearing any pants." The woman laughs and shakes her head. "Well, your fancy gadget must be malfunctioning, because I definitely am." Bond taps the watch, frowning slightly. Then, with a sly smile, he mutters, "Thing's an hour fast." Beverly, 90 years young, had played golf every single day since her retirement 25 years ago. But one evening, she returned home looking unusually downcast. "That's it," she told her husband, Gus. "I'm giving up golf. My eyesight has gotten so bad that once I hit the ball, I can't see where it goes." Gus, who was a remarkable 103 years old, made her a comforting cup of tea and said, "Why don't you take me along and give it one more try?" Beverly sighed. "That's no good," she replied. "You're 103. What help could you possibly be?" Gus straightened up proudly and said, "I may be 103, but my eyesight is perfect." The next day, Beverly reluctantly took Gus to the golf course. She teed up, took a powerful swing, and squinted down the fairway. Turning to Gus, she asked, "Did you see the ball?" "Of course I did," Gus replied confidently. I told you, my eyesight is perfect. Great, said Beverly, feeling a surge of hope. So where did it go? Gus paused for a moment, then scratched his head. I don't remember. Two men stumbled out of the bar after a long night of drinking, jumped into their car, and sped off. They were laughing about their night when suddenly a light tap came at the passenger window. Passenger terrified. Look at the window. There's an old man ghost's face there. The driver panicked and hit the gas, but the old man's face stayed right at the window. The passenger, shaking, rolled the window down just a little. What do you want? He stammered. Old man, calmly. You got any tobacco? Fumbling, the passenger tossed him a cigarette and yelled, Step on it. The driver floored it. A few minutes later, they calmed down and started laughing. Driver, I don't know what happened, but don't worry, we're doing 80 now. Suddenly, more tapping on the window. Passenger, panicking again. There he is again. Shakily, he rolled down the window. Yes? Old man, softly. Do you have a light? The passenger screamed, threw a lighter out the window and yelled, Step on it! Now speeding at 100 miles an hour, they tried to shake the fear. Just as they thought it was over, another tap on the window. Passenger, screaming in terror. What now? Old man, calmly. You want some help getting out of the mud? A Skyliner 900 is cruising across the Atlantic at 800 kilometers per hour, flying at 30,000 feet. Suddenly, a sleek fighter jet, the Falcon X2, appears. The pilot of the jet slows down and pulls alongside the Skyliner, then radios. Skyliner, this flight must be pretty dull. Watch this. With that, he flips the jet upside down, accelerates to break the sound barrier, climbs at a dizzying rate, and dives sharply towards the sea. He loops back to the Skyliner and asks, Well, how was that? The Skyliner pilot calmly responds, Very impressive, but now, check this out. The fighter pilot waits, eyes fixed on the Skyliner, but nothing happens. The Skyliner continues its steady flight at the same speed. 10 minutes go by, then 15. Finally, the Skyliner pilot radios. Well, how did I do? Confused, the fighter pilot asks, What did you do? The Skyliner pilot laughs and says, I got up, stretched my legs, walked to the back of the plane, used the restroom, grabbed a cup of tea, and enjoyed a blueberry muffin. An American tourist in London decides to skip his tour group and explore the city on his own. He wanders around, seeing the sights, and occasionally stopping at a quaint pub to soak up the local culture, chat with the lads, and have a pint of beer. After a while, he finds himself in a very high-class neighborhood with big, stately residences. No pubs, no stores, no restaurants, and worst of all, no public restrooms. He really has to go, especially after all those beers. He finds a narrow side street with high walls surrounding the adjacent buildings and decides to use the wall to solve his problem. As he is unzipping, he is tapped on the shoulder by a London bobby who says, I say, sir, you simply cannot do that here, you know. I'm very sorry, officer, replies the American, but I really have to go, and I just can't find a public restroom. Ah, yes, said the bobby, just follow me. He leads him to a back delivery alley, then along a wall to a gate, which he opens. In there, points the bobby. Whiz away, anywhere you want. The fellow enters and finds himself in the most beautiful garden he has ever seen. Manicured grass lawns, statuary, fountains, sculptured hedges, and huge beds of gorgeous flowers, all in perfect bloom. Since he has the cop's blessing, he unburdens himself and is greatly relieved. As he goes back through the gate, he says to the bobby, That was really decent of you. Is that British hospitality? No, replied the bobby with a satisfied smile on his face. That is the French embassy. A second grade teacher is having a class one day, and she says to the kids in the room, "Class, today we are going to find out what your dads do for a living. I want you to say what he does. Spell it, and if he were here today, what he would do for us." Mary jumps up and raises her hand quickly, saying, "Oh, teacher, please pick me." The teacher says, "Okay, Mary, you go first." Mary stands up with a confident look on her face and says, "My dad is a baker. It's spelled B-A-K-E-R. And if he were here today, he'd give everyone a donut." All the kids in the class cheered for Mary. Bobby raises his hand next and says, "Oh, teacher, let me go next." The teacher says, "Okay, Bobby, it's your turn." Bobby stands up and says, "My dad is a banker, B-A-N-K-E-R, and if he were here today, he'd give everyone $1. All the kids in the class cheered and clapped for Bobby. Next, the teacher called on little Tony. Little Tony stood up and said, "My dad is electrician. It's spelled L-E-C-T. Oh, wait. Let me start again. It's spelled I-E-L-T-R-I. No, I need to start over." At this point, the teacher could see little Tony was struggling, and she said, "Okay, Tony, why don't you sit down and think about it, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes." Billy was frantically waving his hand high in the air from the back of the class. The teacher said, "Okay, Billy, it's your turn." Billy stands up and looks around at all the kids in the class and said, "My dad is a B-O-O-K-I-E, and if her were here today, he'd give 10 to 1 odds little Tony ain't never going to spell electrician." An American decided to write a book about famous churches around the world. So he bought a plane ticket and took a trip to Orlando, thinking that he would start by working his way across the USA from north to south. On his first day, he was inside a church taking photographs when he noticed a golden telephone mounted on the wall with a sign that read, "10,000 per call." The American, being intrigued, asked a priest who was strolling by what the telephone was used for. The priest replied, "That is a direct line to heaven, and for $10,000 you can talk to God." The American thanked the priest and went along his way. Next stop was in Atlanta. There, in a very large cathedral, he saw another golden telephone, with the same sign under it. He wondered if this was the same kind of telephone he saw in Orlando, and he asked a nearby nun what its purpose was. She told him, "That is a direct line to heaven, and for $10,000 you can talk to God." "Okay, thank you," said the American. He then traveled all across America, then onto Europe, England, Japan, and New Zealand. In every church he saw an identical golden telephone with the same $10,000 per call sign under it. The American decided to travel to China to see if China had the same phone. After he landed in China, he went into the first church he found. There was the golden telephone, but this time the sign under it read 40 cents per call. The American was surprised, so he asked the priest about the sign. "Father, I've traveled all over the world, and I've seen this same golden telephone in many churches. I'm told that it is a direct line to heaven, but in all of them, the price was $10,000 per call. Why is it so cheap here?" The priest smiled and answered, "You're in China now, son. This is heaven, so it's a local call." A man notices a sign in front of a house. "Talking dog for sale." Intrigued, he rings the doorbell. The owner answers and tells him the dog is in the backyard. The man heads back and finds a black mutt sitting there. "You talk?" he asks the dog. "Yep," the dog replies. "Wow, what's your story?" The dog sits up and says, "Well, I discovered I could talk when I was just a pup. Eager to use my talent for good, I reached out to the CIA, and before I knew it, they had me jetting all over the world. I was in top-secret meetings, listening in on spies and world leaders. Nobody ever suspected a dog. I was their top spy for 8 solid years. The man is stunned as the dog continues. Eventually, the travel wore me out, and I wanted a quieter life. So I took a job at the airport as an undercover security dog. I sniffed around suspicious folks and uncovered some major schemes. I got a stack of medals, settled down, started a family, and now I'm enjoying retirement. The man can't believe what he's hearing. He goes back inside and asks the owner, "How much do you want for this dog?" The owner shrugs. $10. $10? This dog is incredible. Why so cheap? The owner sighs. Because he's a liar. He never did any of that stuff.